Welcome. In this explainer, we're going to equip you with a really practical guide to identifying the biggest threats to your honeybees. So let's start with the big question, right? Are my bees healthy? We're going to dive into this because honestly, the health of your hive determines, well, everything, from your honey production all the way to whether the colony itself even survives.
So first up, let's really get a handle on the stakes here. Why is being so vigilant, so on top of things, absolutely critical for every single beekeeper? Well, if you let disease go unchecked, it creates this cascade of problems. We're talking reduced growth, way lower honey production, and it even weakens pollination for agriculture all around you. Ultimately, it can lead to the total death of the colony, and for beekeepers, that's a huge economic loss.
This brings us to what's really the golden rule of beekeeping. Prevention is always better than a cure. A strong, well-managed hive is just naturally more resilient to disease.
And the thing is, you can stop so many problems before they even start, just by following some fundamental rules. Simple stuff, really, like isolating any new or sick colonies, making sure they have clean food and water, good ventilation in the hive, just keeping the floor clean. It all adds up.
Okay, now let's get into the nitty-gritty and talk about what I'd call enemy number one, American foul brood. People call it AFB, and it is one of the most destructive bacterial diseases a beekeeper can ever face.
So what makes AFB so dangerous is just how resilient it is. See, the bacteria forms these spores, and these things are incredibly tough. They can survive for over 50 years. Think about that, just waiting in old equipment for a chance to infect a hive.
So when you open your hive, this is the very first thing you should be looking for. See that irregular, kind of spotty brood pattern? Healthy brood should be a solid wall of cappings. But with AFB, you get these sunken, perforated caps where the bees have been trying to get rid of the dead larvae inside. It's a huge red flag.
But here's the good news. You don't need some fancy lab to get a pretty good idea of what's going on. You can do a simple diagnosis right there in the field with just a little twig or a matchstick.
And this is the telltale sign. This is what you're looking for. You stir the gunk in one of those bad-looking cells, and if it pulls out into a slimy, brown, rope-like thread, yeah, that is the definitive sign of American foul brood.
Now it is crucial, absolutely crucial, not to confuse AFB with European foul brood or EFB. They sound similar, but they're very different. So here are the key things to know. AFB kills the larvae after the cell is capped. EFB kills them before. With AFB, you get that long, ropey thread and a really foul, fishy smell. But with EFB, the larvae are more watery, not ropey at all, and they have more of a sour, vinegar-like odor. Knowing the difference is a really big deal.
Okay, let's shift gears and talk about enemy number two, the varroa mite. This thing is so destructive, it's often just called the killer mite, and for good reason.
And here's a key difference from a bacterial disease. You can often see these parasites with your own eyes. Look at the photo on the left. See those little reddish-brown spots on the bees? Those are varroa mites. They're literally attached to their bodies.
So what are the symptoms?
Well, besides seeing the mites themselves, one of the biggest signs is bees with deformed wings. If you see newly emerged bees with these shrunken, crumpled wings, varroa should be your #1 suspect, because the mite actually transmits the virus that causes it.
This slide right here shows why varroa is so hard to get rid of. The whole reproductive cycle happens hidden away, underneath the capped brood. The female mite sneaks into a cell right before the bees seal it up, and then she and her offspring reproduce by feeding on the helpless bee pupa inside. And this is the damage you can't see from the outside. The mites are literally weakening the next generation of bees before they're even born. It leads to a slow but inevitable collapse of the entire colony if it's left untreated. So, we've learned how to spot the enemies. Now, let's talk about your action plan. We'll recap the key diagnostic steps and talk about what comes next.
Your plan always starts with regular, careful observation. Every time you're in the hive, you need to be running through these checks. Scan for that irregular brood pattern. Do the matchstick test if you're suspicious. Look for those little red mites on the bees. And check for those deformed wings. It's your first line of defense. And you have to remember this. Bee health is a community issue. When a hive is collapsing, it doesn't just quietly die off. The bees will leave, and they'll carry those diseases and mites with them to all the neighboring hives.
And this is why this all matters so much. You have to coordinate with other beekeepers in your area. If you treat your hives but your neighbor doesn't, you're just going to get reinfested. A lone wolf approach to treatment is pretty much doomed to fail.
So it all comes down to this: observe, diagnose, and then act. By turning these simple observations into action, you really do become your hive's best defense against its biggest threats.